Okay, let's unpack this.
Right.
We're diving into the sometimes surprising, often frustrating, and, well, definitely expensive side of travel.
The pitfalls.
Exactly. Those hidden complexities and costs that just pop up when you least expect them.
Hmm.
You've handed us this stack of sources, articles, research, some really personal notes, too.
Yeah.
And they paint a picture of travel that's maybe a little less glamorous than, the brochures suggest.
That's right. So our mission today really is to go through all this material you sent,
Okay.
pull out the most important sort of nuggets of knowledge and insight,
Gotcha.
and help you get really well informed about these potential issues, things you might not anticipate.
Give us a heads up, basically.
Exactly. Shine a light on them, give you a head start navigating it all. It's about seeing the reality, beyond the advertised price.
Yeah, absolutely. Reading through this stuff was, frankly, eye-opening.
Mm-hmm.
There are challenges here I certainly hadn't even considered.
It happens.
So we're going to cover ground on both domestic and international travel experiences highlighted in these sources.
Sounds good.
So buckle up. Things get interesting fast.
Okay. Let's start close to home then. Flying in America.
Right.
Your source material suggests this can be, well, pretty challenging sometimes, even for simple trips.
It really does. And one of the first things that jumped out from the sources is about hidden baggage fees,
Ah, yes.
particularly on those shorter regional flights within the U.S.
Yeah.
You see a nice low price online, maybe Google Flights or somewhere.
Looks good initially.
But that's often just the start, isn't it?
Yeah, and a key takeaway here is how dramatically those fees can, inflate the final cost.
Right.
The research you found shows separate fees for both carry-on and checked bags are often added after you see that first low fare.
So it ends up being way more expensive.
Significantly more, sometimes more than a ticket from another airline that seemed pricier but actually included bags. So the crucial advice from these notes: explicitly confirm what your booking includes baggage-wise before you hit purchase. Make sure it's in there.
Good tip. Beyond the financial sting, the sources also bring up physical discomfort,
Oh, yeah.
especially on those smaller regional jets. If you're 6 feet tall or more.
Knees hitting the seat in front.
Exactly. You know the feeling.
And according to your material, it gets worse if someone shorter, say 5'5", tries to recline.
Apparently so. The seat mechanisms on some planes have issues, pushing back in a way that puts real pressure on the person behind.
Oh, wow.
The sources even mention flight attendants sometimes just acknowledging, yeah, that seat's kind of broken when people complain.
Broken seats. Great.
And that can lead to actual physical problems, not just, annoyance.
Precisely. The sources detail things like cramps, poor circulation for taller folks,
Oof,
and increased pain, especially if you have something like neuropathy, from that constant pressure.
that's rough. And then, on those shorter regional flights, under 4 hours, no free food.
Well, that's become pretty standard, hasn't it?
True. But this material adds another specific, often overlooked detail.
Oh,
The air conditioning. Apparently, it's often blasted at the lowest temperature.
freezing.
And get this, no free blankets.
You have to buy them.
Yeah. And often only with a debit card. And this isn't stuff they tell you up front when you book or even before boarding.
So you just find out when you're already cold.
Pretty much, yeah. Frustrating detail.
Definitely.
Okay, let's pivot slightly, but stay domestic. Online taxi services.
Right, like Uber or Lyft.
The sources highlight additional layers of complexity there, too, for ground transport.
Yeah, this raises that question again. How does the final cost compare to what you first saw?
Exactly.
The core issue identified here is hidden surcharges and taxes. They inflate the fare way beyond what the app initially showed.
And your notes give a pretty startling example.
They do. A supposedly $8 taxi fare ended up being $50 or more because of all these added fees.
$50
Yeah.
from 8. That jump is just unbelievable.
Well, it is.
Did the sources explain why? Why so high or hidden?
It seems to be a mix. Local taxes, platform fees, maybe some dynamic pricing that isn't clearly broken down up front.
Huh.
And the really frustrating part, as the sources point out, these surcharges might not even appear until after your trip.
Seriously?
Yes, sometimes days later on your final charge.
Wow, okay.
Your notes also have some practical advice here, though.
Good.
Find the authorized pickup zones for these services before confirming the ride.
Why is that?
Because any time spent searching for your driver after they arrive, well, that meter's running.
Ah, so it adds to the fare.
Right. Pushing your final cost up even more.
Got it. Okay, let's unpack the next section then. International travel.
Right.
According to these sources, this introduces a whole different set of challenges. often more severe.
Indeed. And if we connect that domestic fee issue globally, U.S. airlines flying internationally often hit you with really substantial checked luggage fees.
How substantial are we talking?
The research you provided puts it in the, $100 to $200 range per bag.
Ouch. So much for packing everything you think you need.
Pretty much. And this material details another critical point on some U.S. international carriers: paying for food up front.
You have to prepay for your meal.
On some, yeah. And the source points out, if you don't know this, you might end up waiting to be served only after everyone who paid gets their meal.
So you ate last, if at all.
Potentially. Plus, the food quality described is often poor, high sugar, high starch.
Which is a big problem for some people.
Exactly. The source specifically mentions issues for diabetic passengers who might not have other options handy.
So the advice is?
Clear recommendation from the sources: buy your own food inside the airport before you board. Just be prepared.
Makes sense. And water supply, another potential issue based on these notes.
It seems so. The sources advise grabbing large water bottles beforehand, too. Water can be surprisingly scarce on board those long flights.
Good to know. And comfort on those long hauls.
Also mentioned, specifically, lack of good lumbar support in the seats.
Creating that hollow space in your lower back?
Exactly, which over many hours can apparently lead to significant neuropathic pain for some people.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly a bit alarming, reading these sources.
Uh-oh. What's this?
A critical, less-known pitfall. This absolutely undisclosed requirement for a return ticket to the foreign country you're visiting.
Wait, to the country, not just from it.
That's what the sources say.
Wow. That's a significant point. Because, as the sources starkly state, even experienced travelers might not realize this rule exists.
Until when?
Until they are literally standing at the check-in counter at the airport, day of departure.
No way.
Your notes indicate these airlines often don't have 24/7 support. And the notification, the demand to buy this ticket, it appears only when you're face-to-face with the agent checking your bags.
And the consequences sound, well, incredibly severe based on the sources.
They are. The source emphasizes the very real risk. You might not be allowed to fly at all.
Just turned away.
Right. And if you don't have the funds available immediately, right there, to buy that return flight.
Which will be last-minute, super extensive prices.
Exactly. Exorbitant. You could miss your entire expensive outbound flight.
And you don't get a refund for that original ticket.
Critically, no. No refund. The sources give that vivid scenario. You arrive, check your bag, suddenly told, nope, can't fly without this return ticket to your destination. Buy it now for maybe hundreds of thousands, or forfeit your whole trip and all the money you spent.
And the kicker.
No email, no text messages sent in advance to warn you, nothing.
That feels incredibly unfair, almost deliberately hidden. Why? Did the sources explain why airlines would do this?
They don't dive deep into the why, like the airline's specific motives, but the implication is maybe it's enforcing some obscure destination country rule, or perhaps just generating extra revenue from people caught unprepared. What's equally concerning, as the sources mention,
There's more.
some airlines might also require you to buy a visa for the destination country at the same time you buy that required return ticket.
Again, at the counter, last minute.
Again, suddenly, at the airport. No prior email, text, call, nothing.
Wow.
And your notes indicate this requirement can even stop you printing your boarding pass until these unexpected fees are paid.
Unbelievable. The sources also touch on confusion around forced, long layovers.
Yeah, in unexpected transitioning countries, places definitely not on your original itinerary.
And the flight name changes.
Compounding the confusion, yes. The flight name can change when you leave these places.
What's the danger there?
It's fascinating and potentially quite risky. If you get confused by the stop or the name change, maybe you leave the transit area thinking you've arrived, or head to the host country's immigration instead of waiting for the connection.
You could miss your actual connecting flight.
Entirely. And the sources specifically note the airline probably won't help you if you make that mistake.
So what's the advice?
Your material stresses. Ask the flight attendants for clarification. If anything feels off or unclear about your transit or connection, ask, especially since some of these countries have much stricter border controls than you might expect.
Okay, so assuming you navigate that potential flight maze, let's talk about in-country pitfalls. Logistics once you arrive, starting with arrival and departure itself.
Right. Upon arrival in some foreign countries, the sources point out, watch out for additional hidden visa fees imposed right there at the border, even if you thought everything was sorted.
And they might ask for proof of accommodation.
Unexpectedly, yes. Hotel, Airbnb, booking confirmation, whatever. They might demand to see it before they grant you entry.
And your sources mention some equally unusual points about customs checks, too.
They do. Even if you declare nothing, you might still get pulled aside, directed to customs for another layer of security and luggage checks.
Seems redundant.
And you might even be asked to fill out declaration forms again, right there on the spot.
That just sounds incredibly inefficient. For everyone.
It does. And just as unusual, according to your notes, some countries charge a hidden taxation fee when you leave.
An exit tax.
Sort of, but it's calculated per person for every single day you were in the country.
Wow. Even if you paid for a visa to get in.
Even then, it's an unexpected parting gift, financially speaking.
Okay, navigating money issues sounds like another major hurdle based on these sources.
Absolutely. Your material details problems with currency exchange.
Like fees.
Fees just to buy the local currency when you arrive. And maybe more surprising, the source notes that, in some places, the locals might not even really use their own currency much.
Forcing you to use euros or dollars.
Exactly. Which can then be hard to get. ATMs might have really low withdrawal limits, like maybe only $50 at a time.
Makes getting cash for bigger things tough.
Very tough. The sources strongly stress have enough physical cash beforehand, especially if you need to pay for, say, an Airbnb in person when you arrive. You don't want to be stranded without funds.
And communication costs, phones, data.
Can get out of hand fast, it seems. Your sources indicate some countries don't authorize unlimited data plans for foreigners.
So you're stuck with pay-as-you-go.
Expensive pay-as-you-go rates, yeah.
Yeah.
And big warnings about using international roaming or even making or getting calls from U.S. numbers. Those charges can pile up incredibly quickly.
The sources also touch on some surprising, stricter local rules tourists wouldn't expect.
Yes, like a really specific example. A mandatory visit to the local police station.
Police station.
With your landlord on the day you arrive to officially register your lease contract.
You're kidding.
Nope. Both you and the landlord have to sign it with the police. And the source says emphatically, otherwise you won't be able to do anything.
Implying you can't legally live there or
conduct necessary business, yeah. It's a huge bureaucratic step most travelers wouldn't dream of.
Wow. That's a level of local bureaucracy. Just wow.
It's critical info, but totally non-obvious. And then there are countries that are supposedly no visa required for Americans for short stays.
Yeah.
The source points out you might still need to check in every 3 months.
Check in how?
Often means a mandatory trip across the border to a neighboring country and then coming right back, just to get a new stamp or visa to stay another period.
Good grief. Okay, what about getting around locally? App-based transport, more pitfalls.
According to the sources, yes. In some countries, the apps might not use local currency. They rely on other apps or systems.
Okay.
And they often use a metered system where the price skyrockets if you get stuck in traffic.
How much are we talking?
The source notes it can easily add $50 or more to the fare you first saw. Turns a short ride into a really expensive one unexpectedly.
All right, here's where it gets really interesting again. And frankly, quite concerning, especially for safety.
Okay.
The sources have significant repeated warnings about booking hotels online in foreign countries.
This really raises questions about, well, how trustworthy those online platforms are, doesn't it? And the info they provide.
Definitely. The prevalence of scams described in the sources is just alarming.
What kind of scams?
They detail using fake addresses or intentionally altering just one letter or number in the listed address.
So it looks right on the map.
It might look legal on a map, yeah, or even match a real street. But when you copy and paste that altered address into your GPS or navigation app,
it sends you somewhere else entirely.
Miles away. The source gives this vivid example from Puerto Rico. Advertised as nearby attractions, but the actual address, when navigated, put the traveler 70 miles away.
70 miles. So the hotel just keeps your money because you obviously can't get there.
Exactly, because these bookings are often non-refundable. You cancel because the address is wrong, you can't reach it, they keep the money.
That's described as a deliberate tactic.
Yeah, to exploit tourists. The sources also mention widespread issues with pictures not matching reality. Like how?
Rooms being way smaller than shown, lacking windows, maybe even no toilet, or no heating in winter. Basic stuff missing.
And they won't let you cancel.
Your notes indicate establishments often refuse cancellations, even with this misleading info. Seems like they want to maintain constant bookings and just profit from unsuspecting travelers.
Given these risks, did the sources offer strong advice? How do you avoid these hotel scams?
They do. Very strong advice. Whenever possible, especially for longer stays or if you're unsure about the area,
Yeah.
visit the hotel in person before you finalize that booking.
See it with your own eyes first.
Exactly. And this is particularly stressed as a safety measure if you're traveling with women and children. Arriving late at night at a fake address or 170 miles away leaves you stranded and really vulnerable.
That makes a lot of sense.
Oh.
So bringing all of this together, what does this deep dive into the sources really tell us about traveling today?
Well, if you connect all these dots, right? The hidden fees, the physical discomfort, unexpected rules on arrival and departure, money problems, bureaucratic hoops, outright scams.
Yeah.
Linking that to the bigger picture, it means travelers, according to this material you provided, need to be exceptionally vigilant and proactive.
You can't just rely on the first price you see.
You have to look far beyond that surface price, or even the basic visa info listed online. You need to actively seek out information that isn't readily given to you.
By airlines, booking sites, even official-looking government pages sometimes.
Exactly. Proactive digging is required.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given us, and you listening, some key, specific things to watch out for. Pulling those concrete examples right from the sources you sent. Knowing about things like that return ticket demand at check-in or the departure tax per day or those hotel address scams. Hopefully that helps you avoid some of these common, costly traps.
Yeah, the hope is that by understanding these specific pitfalls, knowing what questions to ask, what to double check, you're empowered.
Take precautions you wouldn't have known were needed.
Right. It shifts the power back to you, the traveler, at least a little bit.
Right. So here's a final provocative thought for you to consider based on everything we've just discussed from these sources. If so many parts of travel flights, ground transport, hotels, even just being in the country, come with these hidden costs, these unexpected requirements, these risks of scams that are not disclosed up front.
And sometimes it seems intentionally not disclosed.
Right. What does this pattern tell us about how the travel industry might operate? And maybe more importantly, how much personal responsibility must travelers realistically take now to navigate what seems like an increasingly complex and sometimes, deceptive system?
It's definitely a lot to think about. Hopefully, processing all this information changes how you approach planning your next trip, prompts deeper questions, more thorough checking.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for providing all this source material for this deep dive. It's been incredibly insightful, maybe a bit sobering too, about modern travel realities.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and use these insights wisely on your journeys.
We really can't wait to see what fascinating, complex topic you send our way for the next deep dive.